part 1 of Wider Than Myself, we looked at how being part of a collective beyond yourself can bring a power to achieve things beyond what you could do as an individual. How a group of seemingly insignificant people can, together, create incredibly significant results. Today, in part 2, we're going to pull our focus back to you as an individual. We're still looking at the power of being part of a collective, but we're now looking at the internal power, health, or other benefits that it can bring you personally or any other individual in the collective. Now, I understand that using the term power in our culture is tagged with a slew of negative connotations, and there are reasons for that. As Freedom in Thought describe in their YouTube video on the subject, a lot of popular literature on power takes the Machiavellian approach of obtaining it by any means necessary. It's this idea of taking power through stepping on other people that's considered evil in many cultures around the world. Freedom in Thought continues, saying that we need to be able to be a little more nuanced, that, and quote, defining power as intrinsically negative is incredibly unproductive. Just as power is used to make negative changes, it can also be used to make positive changes. Unquote. In contrast to one prevailing idea in self-help, that you need to be a domineering individual to have power, to become successful, and to become happy, today we will look at another perspective, and we will get there. But to help us understand the distinction between the positive and negative in our own lives, we will start in examining that Machiavellian approach. Welcome to Redlily Radio. Radio. Machiavellianism is a term used in psychology to refer to a trait in people. And this trait is the willingness to manipulate, to deceive, or to exploit other people in order to achieve their goals. The term stems from the 15th century Florentine political advisor, Niccolo Machiavelli, who is also the writer of a book called The Prince, in which he describes methods for acquiring and maintaining political power through a variety of methods often considered immoral. Now here's just a few quotes from the English translation of the book. Quote, "If an injury has to be done to a man, it should be so severe that his vengeance need not be feared." Or, "It is much safer to be feared than to be loved." Now Machiavelli's actual position on all of this is often debated, as some of his later works would suggest that he considers other models to actually be more ideal, and that perhaps that The Prince was meant to be an expose on the tyrannical ruling Medici family of the time. Regardless, it's for these writings in The Prince that he is most well known and most widely quoted. If we look at a more recent work, another book, The 48 Laws of Power, this time by Robert Greene, Greene promotes growing your own power through a wide variety of methods, again, many are controversial. Here's just a few. Get others to do the work for you, but always take the credit. Never put too much trust in your friends. Learn how to use your enemies. Crush your enemy, totally. Now, I can understand how people who've been through a series of horrible, frustrating life circumstances can be attracted to this way of thinking. The frustration of someone who's tried and tried for so long, but felt like that they get nowhere, it can be tempting to jump on this kind of desperate action. If we look at the Joker movie just released this year with Joaquin Phoenix, it's a prime example of a character who feels like they've been pushed to the extreme and take extreme action through this extreme frustration. It is understandable, but this doesn't make it the best choice for that individual or for the society around them. And we do always have a choice in which actions we take. Now, as a personal coach, we are trained not to push our biases onto our clients, and I would not do that in a session. But today I want to offer you my opinion, and then you can choose for yourself whether you agree with it or not. I believe that one very effective and healthy way to live is to follow your own individual journey, growing and evolving along the way. But to do so, still aware of and woven into the community and society around you, especially if you can share opportunities and resources with those around you, helping those other individuals to evolve on their own journeys too. Don't worry, I'm not asking you to take my word for it. We'll come back to that point, but first let's explore a few more significant areas that build this up. One of the big challenges with following your own journey and simultaneously being integrated into the society around you is that a tension may come up through the difference in values and priorities of you and that society. You may find yourself hanging out with a group of friends, and perhaps they don't quite understand what it is you're trying to do on your chosen path. They might even tease you for it. They might even shame you for it. And as you experience this tension, you might find yourself wanting to detach from the world around you. In Joseph Campbell's classic, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, he excavates a pattern that most, if not all, mythological hero stories have followed from around the world. The suggestion is that this pattern, often referred to as the hero's journey or the monomyth, can actually be seen in parts of our lives when we embark on our own journeys too, when we leave the familiar, when we face our fears, as we grow stronger, as we defeat our inner demons, and so on. One significant part of the journey that I find often gets touched on way too lightly and talks about it is the phase named the return back home. In this part of the journey, the hero, or in our worldly sense, ourselves going on our own personal journeys, we must come back and reintegrate into the world from which we originally came, because that's how we can live and share what we've learnt on this journey with the people around us. Campbell explains, quote, "The first problem of the returning hero is to accept as real, after an experience of the soul-satisfying vision of fulfillment, the passing joys and sorrows, banalities, and the noisy obscenities of life. Why re-enter such a world? Why attempt to make plausible or even interesting to men and women consumed with passion the experience of transcendental bliss? As dreams that were momentous to us by night may seem simply silly in the light of day, so the poet and the prophet can discover themselves playing the idiot before a jury of sober eyes. The easy thing is to commit this whole community to the devil and retire again to the heavenly rock dwelling and close the door." Now the point here isn't to consider yourself some hero among your peers coming to save them all. The point is to recognize that sometimes there can be a great mismatch and struggle in holding onto your chosen path while remaining integrated into the real world. However, it's important to practice holding on to both. I mean, we could simply let go of our own journey and just do what the majority says is correct. I mean, that would be easy, we would get along with everyone. The issue with this way of operating lies in what is called groupthink in psychology. In a 25-year scientific meta-study on the effects of group-based decision-making, Marlene Turner and Anthony Pratkanis concluded that under circumstances in which the members of a group choose consensus-building actions rather than trusting their own judgment, it can result in, quote, "the illusion of invulnerability, collective rationalization, stereotypes of outgroups, self-censorship, as well as symptoms of defective decision-making, poor information search, failure to appraise the risks, and so on," unquote. This kind of defective decision-making is especially prevalent in the formation of dangerous mob mentalities, as we discussed in part 1. Now here you could just say, I will just stick to my own journey, my own path, and I don't need anyone else in my life then. But as humans, we are highly social animals. Even if you consider yourself an introvert, you need some socialization. And that integration with the wider world is one of our needs. In an article published in the journal American Psychologist in the year 2000, Richard Ryan and Edward Deci argue that there were three main elements which build our motivation and our well-being. They identified these elements as being competent at the work we do, in having the autonomy and the freedom of choice about what we do or how we do it, and in feeling connected to the world that we live in. They argue that all three are needed to have this fulfillment, and that we suffer when one of those elements suffer. So as it turns out, it is in fact in our best interest to remain connected to those around us. How then do we stay committed to the path that we judge is right, and stay committed to the society in which we live, especially when they're at odds? Well, this is where the thinking of an old friend of ours comes in. An old friend named Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. As you may have learned in history class, or in the 1982 film of the same name, Gandhi was and is an incredibly influential icon for the movement that he started, the collective that he started, which ultimately forced the British government out of India, giving the country back its own independence. And they did this all without the use of any violence. We can learn a lot from Gandhi's ideals, and especially one of his core ideals here, which is called Satyagraha, which is Hindi for holding onto truth. Now, the concept of Satyagraha goes far deeper than personal development, and we obviously don't all need to start revolutions. But the symbol of commitment to your path, that is what we can take. The resilience that we can continuously develop. The longer that we can stick to the journey that we judge as healthy or right, the more chance that we can pull it off. Even when we have found ourselves distracted or pulled away from our journey, even after years, there is still a possibility of us reconnecting with it. We have never failed indefinitely. It is through this resilience we build that we can also stay connected to our peers, respecting them and enjoying their company, while simultaneously holding on to our truth, regardless of how much they understand or respect the journey themselves, or how much they don't. At this point, you may be thinking, this is all very idealistic. Well, yes, it is. I know full well that the complexity of the world and the different forces in it make it very hard to stay committed in the straightforward sense. But it isn't impossible, and what I'm arguing for today is just one attitude that you can choose to follow if you wish. For me personally, this theory holds true, and through my own experience, in the long term, it bears fruit. Now, if you followed this far, awesome. Stick around for a little more, because it gets even cooler. So far I've argued that one of the most effective and healthy ways for us to live is by staying committed to our own individual journeys, but also by remaining integrated with and respecting the people and society around us. But simple respect isn't where things need to stop. We can actually support our peers on their own individual journeys too. We can keep them in mind, and we can share with them the opportunities and the resources that come through our own lives if it will help them on their own journeys. We can take actions to boost ourselves, but we can also take actions to boost the individuals around us. Sometimes we can even take actions that do both at the same time. Let's take this attitude and let's call it ripple boosting. We will call it ripple boosting because by making choices that boost those around you, while holding on to your own journey, you can create a kind of ripple effect. It can help elevate them on their own journeys so that they will be in a position to then take actions which will also create a positive ripple effect towards those around them. These ripples keep elevating people, keep empowering people, keep enriching their lives, and the ripples continue on. Like ripples in a pond, the more objects that they hit, the more ripples that get created, and these empowering effects accumulate more and more for everyone in the pond, in our world. Now, ripple boosting isn't a new idea in any form. It's been discussed in most major religions, sociology, and many other belief systems. For example, if we look at the Church of the Unitarian Universalists, they hold a key belief about respect and support for people's many different kinds of spiritual journeys, whatever labels are attached to it. It's this decision to support the others around you, which is the direct opposite of the make yourself win at any cost attitude of the Prince and of the 48 Laws of Power that we discussed at the start of the episode. And the great thing is this: it may seem like this way of acting is a very undirected way of utilizing the power of the collective. And it is less directed than the moon landing mission, for example. But there's something else that happens here, and to explain it, we need to explore one more concept: emergence. One of the podcasts that first got me into podcasting is called Radio Lab. They're a fantastic science, sociology, and general human narrative exploration podcast that I recommend you checking out. But one of the episodes that stayed with me and changed my thinking the most is the episode on emergence, in which they explore how one of the best examples of emergence occurs in ant colonies. Well, what is emergence, you ask? Hang on tight, you're about to find out. You were probably brought up learning about how ant colonies have their thousands of workers and soldiers and their queen who lays a lot of eggs and gives all the orders. We all learned that. Except the issue is that the queens don't actually give orders, and no one in the ant colony gives orders. A colony works through the individual actions of each ant in response to all the other ants around them. Wow, you think. It must be so intelligent. No, wrong again. Ants are incredibly stupid, at least as individual creatures. There are reports of some ants even getting lost for weeks at a time. But despite this leaderless, insurmountable stupidity, ants as a species have actually become one of the most resilient and widespread species on the planet. Arguably even more successful than humans if we're just looking at sheer numbers and spread. The secret to their success becomes more apparent when we zoom out from the individual ant to the level of the colony, treating the whole colony as a single entity. You see, ants communicate with each other using pheromones, or scents, which guide and communicate the other ants to where they've explored and where they've found good food. As more and more ants do their thing, leaving these scents around, the colony gradually swarms on the food, siphons it back to their nest. The order that can emerge in these leaderless teamwork situations is impressive, and this isn't even taking into account the other abilities of ant colonies. For example, to have strategic warfare, to take slaves, to farm even smaller animals as livestock, and to build civil structures hugely impressive for their size. These are all things that ant colonies do. Emergence is the name given to the phenomenon of when a system of seemingly random or stupid individual parts can give birth to a whole new intelligent or complex entity when we zoom out to the wider scale. Emergence occurs in ant colonies, it occurs in human cities, in software programs, even arguably inside our own brains. While we are arguably much smarter than ants as individuals, it does raise the question of what emerges when we zoom out from the individual human level to humans on a society or a global level. It raises the question about what emerges as more of us take this ripple boosting approach, following our own journeys and simultaneously supporting each other. We've talked a lot about power through the last 2 episodes. And if power means to live longer and healthier, then we have to consider that as individuals, we gain this through using medicines, hospitals, and ambulance services that come from the society around us. If power means to have the ability to create more, then we have to consider that we can create more than ever before through the tools and technologies that this society has given us as well. If power means to know and understand more, then we have to consider that through books, through films, through the internet, through podcasts like this, we are exposed to more information than we have ever been able to utilize in our lives before. The greatest powers that we have ever had in our lives haven't come purely from inside ourselves, from our own pure hard work or willpower, but it's come from the world that we live in and that we're integrated in. And just as this world is filled with forces that have an effect on us, we too are a force that has an impact on the world around us. By staying committed to our own journey through resilience, all the while by staying integrated, supportive, and growing into the communities around us, we can enjoy the benefits of both being an individual and of being a collective. And we can give rise to a rich culture of a tapestry of perspectives, of ideas, and we can watch the emerging fruits that grow from the cross-pollination of our intertwined journeys. If you are appreciating this podcast, remember to check out our Patreon page, where you can contribute to the continued production of our episodes made with love, and you can unlock bonus content too. Search Redlily Radio on Patreon to check it out.